Thanks. Good afternoon and welcome to the ARPA Transformational Advisory Committee meeting. I'm Tracy Walker, the CEO of Journey Found and one of the co-chairs of the committee. And as this is a public meeting as defined by the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act, it will follow those guidelines. As the meeting is virtual, it will be recorded and the recording will be available to the public on the DDS website. As usual, committee members are asked to make a good faith effort to state their name and title each time they speak. And you'll be called on by myself or another of the co-chairs to speak. There will be no public comment portion to this meeting. The members of the public are able to join, watch, and listen only. And with that, everyone should have received the minutes from the February 7th meeting. That went out last week. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Barry, a second?
Second, Wynn Everts.
So, Wynn? Okay, great, thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And moving right along, we'll go to the updates from the committee co-chairs. Peter, you have a residential transformation report?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is a strange meeting for us. Our internet is down, so we're all playing stuff on the phone. So we're not able to access all our information. So bear with me as I try to do this from memory, which my memory is not that great, so I'll do the best I can. So we had a meeting last Thursday with our residential committee, and we had Deloitte presented the results of the state's analysis, and we had a great discussion on that. And we spoke about the recommendations and what was coming up, and we also gave an update of where we are at with the committee, with the other committees, and we're looking at issues that we want to try to be working on going forward. We started with the shared housing model, which I was going to give a little presentation at the end, but because I can't access my files, so we're going to have to skip that till the next meeting. But that's kind of where we're at, and so we're looking at what other places or other programs we're going to be looking at. So it's a very not a very detailed response, but as I said, we're limited what we have on our end. So that's my report.
So Tracy Walker, Journey Found. Thank you, Peter. Does anybody have any questions for Peter or the committee? Barry?
So Barry Simon O'Kill. Peter, did the committee speak to or think about both existing residential options and other proposed options as a continuum of care options? Is that how the committee's looking at the discussion?
Yeah, we had been given a number of things to look at. We started looking at that. I think the continuum is on our list. And right now we were doing more of some of the updated pieces of what it would look like. And so I think we're addressing that, but I don't know if it's been formally called a continuum. At our next meeting, I will bring that up to make sure that we have a formal discussion on what a continuum would look like.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Tracy Walker, Journey Found again. Any further questions for Peter before we move on? All right. The day transformation and DDS engagement committees did not meet, so there's no update.
Tracy,
yep,
this
go ahead.
Keith Lovell at DDS. I made an error in the agenda. I believe the DDS engagement did meet, Peter, but it was the individual and family that did not.
Yeah, that's correct.
And,
Uh,
and
the
just
end-
for and just for the bit of tidbit for the day transformation is we'll have two members of the Seln Commission at our next meeting on March 6th. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, this is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Keith. So is there somebody that's going to report on the DDS Engagement Committee?
Yeah, I can do that. Once again, I'll do from my memory. We had a good discussion. We had, trying to remember who attended on that one. I think we had McDowell present at that one. We're working through communications of how to work with the case managers. So we started talking about that. There was discussion regarding the family survey. That was what was presented. Some of the families were a little underwhelmed in terms of the survey. They thought it could have been a little bit more more involved. And so the commitment was made that we will, before we send out the next survey, we will run it through the engagement committee, because there's some family members who thought that they could have assisted with that. Right now, we're looking at, we had Cress Secchiaroli, who's going to be become the chair of that committee with Princess Russell. And we're going to be meeting on a regular basis with McDowell and the individual and family engagement to make sure that the communication we're doing is consistent. And we'll be meeting that on a regular basis. And the idea is to make sure that we start becoming more proactive in terms of our communication to DDS staff as to what's happening, what's coming up, what we're going to be doing. So that's basically what I remember from my memory.
This is Tracy Walker, Journey Found. Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions for Peter on the DDS Engagement Committee? All right, then moving right along, it looks like Betsy and Julia from Deloitte are with us, so take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Julia Oak from Deloitte. So Betsy and I are going to be providing a quick update on the status of technical assistance. So starting in the beginning of February, I think February 3rd was our first session. We've been hosting recurring office hours weekly. Providers are welcome to attend, come and go as they please. And it's just time where our team is on the line ready to answer any questions. And then we've also been available for one-on-one TA sessions. So providers are able to request a meeting either via email, or we also have a form set up that has been sent out where providers can indicate questions and request a session. So I'll be sort of starting off with some high-level numbers of the sessions we've had so far, and then I'll hand it off to Betsy to go into a little bit more detail of some of the types of questions we've received. So to date, we have received questions from 9 providers. This has been through a combination of questions we've gotten via email as well as the different TA sessions. Our most recent session, which was last Friday, we had 3 agencies. I do want to note that's the smallest session to date. Not a huge surprise. We had the biggest number at the first session, and each week attendance has decreased a little bit, but it's still been a chance for folks to pop in, ask a quick question, and leave if they like. And in addition to those recurring office hours, we've hosted 4 one-on-one TA sessions, and we're in the progress of scheduling a 5th one for this week. So seeing a steady stream of questions, and we have a little bit of progress in terms of seems like folks are making more progress on their transition plans. And I'll hand it off to Betsy to go over some of the themes and types of questions we've received so far.
This is Betsy Bello with Deloitte. It's Julia. So we know that there's providers actively working on plans. We do expect the submission of plans within this initial wave of providers, which is exciting. They are asking a lot of questions, just sort of double checking and getting clarity around the incentives, as well as questions related to timelines. There's a lot of concerns related to this idea of, okay, what if we have a plan approved and then some of the people change, or someone decides they don't want to participate after all, or we are planning to move people to individualized supported employment, but we're having difficulty placing people in jobs. And so the response there is flexibility on the timelines, and it doesn't negate their approved plan, just as some timelines shift, or if some of the individuals change, but rather they can work with their regional offices to promote that flexibility and shifting in order for the transition plans to remain person-centered and appropriate and realistic, where they would just need to email their regional office with the update so the plan could be reapproved with the revisions. Other questions that we're hearing sort of in a theme is this idea of people wanting to know if they can create moving on plans that relate to work that's already ongoing. And the answer is absolutely, especially in this first wave. So just because you're a provider who has already been helping people to transition to more individualized settings doesn't mean you're not able to participate in moving on. If anything, it makes it make more sense that you might want to fill out a plan for some of the work you're already doing in order to receive some of the additional incentive funding. We are hearing a lot of enthusiasm and interest in these sessions, particularly people joining the large sessions and then following up with one-on-ones, where providers are really interested in the opportunity to be able to couple these moving on incentives with some of the other funding opportunities that are available to really have an opportunity to move some transformation for their organizations. I've also gotten several questions related to the budget sheet. So there is an FAQ being reviewed by DDS that will help provide some more clarity there, as well as related to some of the other questions we've been receiving. Big pieces are, well, how can we create a budget? So the budget sheet asks for DDS numbers for individuals, and some people don't have those yet because of the stage of planning they're at. And so the DDS finance group has said that they can use estimates based on averages, which I think was encouraging for some folks. And then making sure I'm not missing any of the key pieces I wanted to touch on. But those are really a lot of the exciting pieces. A couple of questions around, if you have a plan that involves, so we're also starting to get some, the questions are changing over time, which is great to see, right? We started with kind of like, what are the incentives? And then people getting embarrassed when we just sort of pull up the moving on guide and go through it. But it can be helpful to, rehear it and go through it again. Into more of, we're specifically thinking about this, or in our plan, in order to, our main focus is moving folks from a CLA into IHS. But in order to make the slots all work, we're also going to move some people from CLA to CLA. Is that part of it? And the answer is, of course, there's no incentive for transitions between two CLAs. However, they should include it as part of their narrative because it can help for the general understanding of what does it mean for the route that their provider agency is taking. So it's been great to be able to hear more about people's plans that are in motion and see some of the enthusiasm for moving on from these initial providers.
This is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Betsy and Julia. Does anyone have questions or comments for Betsy and Julia? All right, seeing none, we'll move along. And who will be presenting for McDowell?
Hi, that's me, Maura Fitzgerald from McDowell Communications.
Okay, go ahead, Maura. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Hello, everyone. I'm Maura Fitzgerald from McDowell Communications. Sticking with the agenda that you guys have, I'll tell you a little bit about the newsletter that we have going on, and then the introduction of STEP. And actually, I'll start with that first. So we had received feedback here from this committee and from a few of the other committees, and then also in the survey that we recently did to individuals and families, that they felt that some people felt that the name Moving On was kind of confusing. They didn't really understand what it meant. And so we set about trying to find a different way of describing what we're doing. And what we landed on was STEP, which stands for Supporting Transformation to Empower People. So we've had the Moving On initiative is the big, kind of overarching ARPA initiative that, most of the work has been done between Deloitte and the providers and, internally at DDS. And now, in the next month or 2 months, probably towards the beginning of April, we're going to be moving into a more, kind of public facing, individuals and families facing phase of this initiative. And so that phase is going to be called STEP. And it's really going to be kind of it's going to embody the supports and the services and the plan moving forward. And it's really intended to kind of outlive the ARPA funding. So STEP is going to be the DDS way of transforming the way individuals and families are able to live into a more independent way of living. We are going to be introducing STEP in the next couple of weeks and getting that going in people's minds. We have a newsletter that is going to be coming out, and I believe I mentioned the last time I was at this meeting that we were working on putting a newsletter together. We finally have that together, and it involves a kind of it's a broad kind of overview for the entire DDS universe of what has been going on over the course of the last almost year, since last summer, to get this initiative moving forward. So there's a letter from the commissioner that's in here, and then just kind of quick summaries. And I can show you quickly what it looks like. It just got approved, final approval this afternoon. Thank you, Peter. And it will be going off to the printer probably tomorrow to start printing out. So if everyone can see my screen, hopefully it's big enough. So this is the newsletter and what it's going to look like. The plan for this particular newsletter, because we are introducing STEP, the newsletter is going to be mailed to all 17,000 individuals supported by DDS. And then it will also be sent by email to DDS staff, providers, and other stakeholders that DDS identifies for us to send this to. So here's the letter from the commissioner, and then just a section on individuals and families. And it's all very just kind of introductory. This is what's been going on, what the STEP program will do, what it's not going to do, to help reassure people that we're not closing all group homes. And it's a 2-page front and back. So just sections for staff and private providers, section on supports, next steps, and then a call to action to get people to subscribe to the e-updates on the DDS website. I just need to. So that's what that looks like. Because this is being mailed out to all of the individuals, it's going to take a week to be at the printers, then it will go to the post office, and then 3 to 5 days it'll start hitting people's mailboxes. So we have about roughly 2 weeks before individuals and families start to receive this newsletter. In that intervening time, we're going to be working with DDS to email the newsletter out to DDS staff, email it out to all of the providers, and email it to any other stakeholders they would like us to email it to. And along with the newsletter, there will also be an introduction, most likely from the commissioner, that will introduce STEP a little bit further than what is in this newsletter to the staff and stakeholders and providers. So we want to make sure that the staff, providers, and other people kind of have this information in advance of it hitting the mailboxes of individuals and families, so that when this does go out to individuals and families, if they have questions and they start contacting their case manager or their provider and asking questions about what's in the newsletter, providers and staff, everyone will have the information beforehand. So they shouldn't be getting surprised by getting calls from individuals with questions about what's going on. So hoping to keep everyone in the loop, moving forward. And then, as I mentioned the last time we met, we're finishing up creating a communications plan that is going to span the next 6 months. So it'll be March through August. We're going to send that to DDS. Once they've approved it, we will be able to share the plan with the various committees to get your input on elements of the communications plan, things that we should be aware of that might not be in there. Also to get some advice and input on people that we should be talking to for kind of the various like newsletters and highlights that we're going to be doing throughout the course of this whole project. So that is getting wrapped up now and hopefully will be done soon. Also, just quickly, we did get the results back from the individuals and families survey. And then just today, we got back the results from a companion survey that we did to DDS staff. And again, the goal of those 2 surveys was to establish a baseline of where people's kind of thoughts, attitudes, and knowledge are of the ARPA initiative and the Moving On plan. And the intention is to use that to set the baselines. And then a year from now, we will resurvey individuals and families and the DDS staff, pretty much asking very similar questions to what was asked the first time around, so we can see how people's opinions have moved. Hopefully they've moved to kind of help us to judge the success of the communications plan. So that is the kind of the goal and the intent of the surveys that went out in this last month and the surveys that will go out again another year from now. And I think that's all I have from the communication side, if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you, Maura. This is Tracy Walker, Journey Found again. Any questions or comments from Maura? All right. Uncharacteristically quiet group today. Peter, how were you planning on approaching agenda item number 7, addressing the issues the advisory committee has identified at previous meetings?
Yeah, I kind of put down what we've done so far and what we still need to do. And as I said, I was going to try to do that shared housing, but I don't have all that information. So I'm going to have to skip that for this week, this month, this meeting, and do that for the next one.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense to the committee.
So this is Tracy Walker again. So is the plan that we're going to have further discussions on any of this, or are those all for future agendas?
Well, and that's, that's why I want to try to keep that up there, because that's what we've identified. So I put down what I thought I could do part of it, and then what the rest of the committee, how they would like us to proceed with those items.
Okay, this is Tracy Walker again. So I guess if there's any suggestions about proceeding with some of the items that do not have a name or an outcome next to them.
So Trace, it's Barry Simon from Oak Hill. So looking at some of those agenda items, and actually I wanted to ask a question afterwards, which is to the Deloitte folks. When we give feedback, what happens? Because like you guys presented the, last time, your report, I know you received quite a bit of feedback from this committee. What happens? Scott came in. I know we gave some feedback and asked some questions, and what happens? So I don't know. So whether going through this list and just seeing if there's answers to any of these questions might be a way to go. I know Peter, is on some of them, and just tabling those is fine. But if there are any where there can be feedback to the committee, just to know that the feedback we're giving is useful and being used, certainly would be good.
Okay, this is Tracy Walker again. Thanks, Barry. Why don't we start with how the feedback that was given last meeting to Deloitte was utilized? Betsy, do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. This is Betsy Bella at Deloitte. I'm glad you asked, Barry, because that is such an important element of feedback, is letting people know how it's used. Otherwise, you stop receiving feedback, right? Nobody wants to put their brain power and their thoughts in if it doesn't go anywhere. So specifically related to the feedback we received on the current state assessment. Yes, that document itself is final, so we're not making revisions there. However, the input we received from this group, as well as the other committees, when we shared the report with them, is playing a key role in our current step of the design process as we are pulling together approaches and elements that DDS can adopt for their support of this transformational element, right? And so we heard from you all, what are some of the key concerns? What are some of the key pain points? We heard from other groups, similar themes, as well as what are the elements that were in that report that were especially interesting, that they would really love to see Connecticut try, or that they have really firm concerns around. And so the input from these groups, as well as the stakeholder input sessions, is really helping to refine and select what are those elements that'll move forward. In fact, in the document we're creating for DDS, where it lays out specific options within options, it's like a Russian nesting doll of choices. But there is a sort of a source table of where did this come from, and one of the columns is from these ARPA committees, right? Because as DDS leadership considers their options, understanding, is this just from the research, or is it from the research and from the committees, just from the committees, understanding, because we know that the input and feedback of this committee and the others is really important, both to us and to DDS, not to speak for DDS, but they wouldn't invest in these if they weren't, right? And so making sure to flag that as part of the decision-making process.
This is Peter Mason. Betsy, maybe you can, one of the asks was that we would send out the survey again to some of the committee members. Did that get done? And then how many were sent back?
This is Betsy Bella Deloitte. Yes, we reopened the survey, sent a note to this group letting them know it was open, and received 2 or 3 more responses. One of those responses was also from someone who had just emailed Peter separately, asking if it was still an opportunity to, well, no. One of those responses was potentially from someone who had emailed asking if there was still an opportunity to respond. So that is a real quick, direct piece of reopening. So thank you to those who were able to respond either in the first open or in the extended time.
This is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Betsy. Before we move off of that with Betsy, any other comments or questions on that piece? Okay. The first bullet under agenda item number 7, will there be any money available and budgeted for training as agencies move into providing less restrictive environments? Do we have an answer to that yet, Peter?
Yeah, this is Peter Mason. That is part of Deloitte's contract. So when we finish with, when they finish their report and DDS makes those recommendations, there's a training component that will be done by Deloitte to providers. The idea is also to be able to video them, and then we can put them online so providers could go back and watch them if they weren't able to make it the first time, or if they want to see, you know, if there was something that said that they forgot. And so we'll have a someplace that will be posted.
This is Tracy Walker again. Okay, thank you, Peter. The second bullet we'll be talking about next time, when Peter has his information in front of him. Rent subsidy issues with the HUD guidelines. Has there been any movement, progress, or direction given to that as of yet?
So the committee has been working through the rent subsidy piece. The HUD guidelines, and we're working through that. There's a little bit more latitude that we're trying to do with the rent subsidy piece. I don't have, we have some specific things that were being added. I know that at one point we used to have, I think it was 40%. We used to have 30% of the income, and then when there was a budgetary issue, it went up to 40%. The recommendation for that would be to go back down to 30%, which would then mean that individuals would only have to use 30% of their income. So that hopefully will allow people to have a higher amount of rent subsidy to it. We're looking at some of the HUD guidelines piece. We did see in one of the analysis from the state, it had to do with non-reoccurring apartment expenses. So we're trying to see how that can be incorporated and working with that through CMS as well. So there are things we're doing. I don't have these list on that, but that's one of the things that I can come back to with the committee in a little bit more detailed piece.
This is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Peter. The next bullet was the lack of support for the interim measures from the provider perspective. I believe at one of the meetings, Peter, you had spoken about the ability of providers to utilize one-time requests for some of those issues. Has that been standardized and put out to resource management in any kind of way such that providers can reliably use that process, or has anything changed about that?
That has been part of our process. I think we were just talking about this morning. One of the things is that this has all been theoretical until we start seeing some of those plans come in. But the component is we do have the incentives, and then there is also the process of putting in for a one-time as well. So for example, if a provider is looking at really expanding their individual supported employment program, and they may need assistance with a job developer, that could be part of the one-time that would be put in to help assist the agency to get to where they need to go. So that could be part of it. So there is that component of a one-time that goes hand in hand with this.
Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Peter. Are there any additional questions or comments on that piece? All right. Helping people understand. Oh, I'm sorry. Wynn?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tracy.
That's okay.
Whenever it's the ARPA Connecticut. So on the discussion about one-times, am I hearing it correctly that one-times are going to be the primary funding source, or is it going to be woven in with other funding sources?
Well, I mean, the one-time is part of the process. I mean, we have the incentives, and in some of those cases, it's twice the rate of where they're going. So they're going to have that. They're also going to have the one-time piece to be able to do that. So, we're trying to see how agencies may need some way to get this started. and they wouldn't be able to rely on incentives, because if they haven't done anything, they wouldn't get an incentive until after the fact. So we're trying to figure out how do we help them to get started, and our thinking is that that would be through a one-time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
This is Tracy Walker, Journey Found again. Anything else on that before we move on? Okay, then help people understand how different kinds of funding can be combined to help people create a plan. And that sounds like that would have to be done on multiple levels, because that would be case managers and, and families and, and providers. Has anything happened on that as of yet?
I know we've had discussions. I don't think we've had anything, anything concrete. We have started about a month ago or two to have Deloitte and McDowell meet on a monthly basis or a weekly basis in terms of communication. So this may be one of those things that we need to bring forward to that group in order, how do we put all this together so that everybody understands what we're doing, how to do it, and how you access it.
This is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Peter. Is there any questions on that at this point in time? Okay, and then the final bullet that we have on this current list is the need to understand the impact of new rates, need transparency, the staffing shortage, impact on preventing agencies moving forward. We did have Scott come last time to talk about the rates. I'm assuming that, Betsy, that Deloitte is gathering that information as part of their surveys and their sessions and their technical assistance sessions as to what providers are listing as their barriers to moving forward.
This is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Funding and rates were certainly listed and included in the input sessions and the survey. Those are complete. We are just waiting on some of the final surveys that were fielded by McDowell, some of those results to finalize that summary. But in terms of sort of the more sorry, I think that answers your question. So yes, we heard that those were some of the barriers, but sort of the more in-depth helping people to understand the rates is beyond the scope of our work.
This is Tracy Walker, and so just to clarify, so there is a comprehensive, in addition to rates, the rate funding and rates, there is a comprehensive list of barriers that are being identified, being generated someplace, and and if not by you, then I would. My question to Peter as to where is that being housed?
This is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Yes, no, we've got a summary of both the barriers and the positives and the ideas that came out of the input sessions and the surveys.
This is Tracy Walker again. Okay, thank you. Additional questions or progress in maybe in other directions on that?
So I know that when Scott came, there were a couple of things, there were a couple of issues with providers that were going to be followed up. I haven't heard anything on that end. So do the providers that were part of that, have there been follow-up from the operations center or Scott on those questions that you had?
I think Kathy had spearheaded a question for a number of providers. So I think, Kathy, you may have been the point person on some of that information.
We have a meeting coming up this week, but we haven't gotten any answers yet. And the point that we had was that the amount we have in writing just has not materialized. Barry, is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, Kathleen, I think yeah, you had talked about how your numbers didn't seem to be matching with a formula that Scott had described. And
Yeah,
so to that
absolutely.
end, yeah.
A-
So he
and
had
we're
said he was going to share that with you.
We're still not seeing it, although every time the conversation happens, it's gone from 10 to 15, but we're looking for 18 and a half. And that's, we're, we're firm on that.
So you have a
we're-
meeting with him this week, though? Is that
Yeah,
what
we
you
do.
said?
Yeah,
All
we
right,
do.
so we'll be interested to see how that meeting goes.
Yeah, we are too. Thanks. Thanks
Yeah.
for checking it.
Yeah, and I know for us, the ICF's issue still looms large in that, there was an agreement made and we still, we didn't get the funding to uphold that agreement. So
The agreement was made by whom?
by the governor's office.
Okay. So is it the expectation to be part of the budget?
I
Or is
would,
it
well,
before the
I mean,
budget?
it was, this goes back to the agreement where, our staff were on strike. The governor made an agreement, the union, they went off strike. We paid the increases that the governor's office agreed to, but we have not received increases in our rates. In fact, I think in 6 of our programs, we got 0 increase to be paying, the increases that the governor's office agreed to.
Well, and to follow up with what Barry said is the numbers don't match the letters. The numbers in the spreadsheet don't match the written letters of support that have been sent out.
Right, and that's why I'm curious as for you, Kathleen. I'd love to hear the feedback after that meeting, if there's any movement. In terms of the ICF barrier, it's a hard thing for DDS to be talking about another state agency's funding source. So I'm not too sure where we're to go with that. That's a DSS issue. So I'm trying to figure out what you're looking for.
Scott had made the comment that he was gathering data for the ICF issue. And so I don't know if there's any further information on that, but for us, it's just that, I understand that DSS pays the Medicaid rate on the services, but they're still your services.
Yeah, they are. As we've talked about it, the ICFs are it's not necessarily our services. There are individuals, but they're not necessarily, the ICFs are a real.
Then I'm great using those slots for other people other than DDS clients. That works for me. And I can go down that route too. But I just, and I know I'm being facetious here, but
right.
They're your services, they're your slots, you control them. And so to that end, I just hope you would advocate for those services. And if not, then, that just opens up a different conversation.
Well, I can say that there's always a lot of conversation with our sister agency regarding this kind of stuff. Sometimes that's listened to and sometimes that's not.
Right.
All I would say is that the things that we do or don't say, we don't share publicly.
Yeah.
Because that is between the 2 state agencies. But I would probably say like 99% of the time we are advocating for the providers. There are some occasions where we may not, but we're usually there. But if whatever we do, we can't share. So it just is not something that would be appropriate, and especially in this kind of a forum.
No,
I will-
I agree. It was Scott had said he was, when he was in this forum, he said he was gathering information for the ICFs. So I was just asking if there was any movement
know
on that,
that
because I
there's-
haven't heard from
there's-
Scott.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of discussions about the ICFs and where those, what the direction is going to be. We have some agencies that have wanted to convert them to CLAs versus an ICF. And then you run into issues of how does that get funded? Just so people understand, DSS is the one who pays or funds the ICFs. And they receive half of their funding for the budget of those agencies, and then they bill CMS for the other half. If DDS was to take over those houses, it would have to then become the full amount to go to DDS, because we don't bill for those at this point. They're billed after the fact. So that's a budgetary issue that we would have to overcome. So there's the things that we look at and are being looked at. I haven't been involved in those. I can only give you the periphery of what I know. I can go back to Scott and see where that is. Now, I'm not too sure I don't know if they're looking at your or the provider's specific issue regarding the minimum wage, or if they're looking at that plus the future, or if they're just looking at what the future is. I'll have to go back and ask Scott what they're looking at.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if he wants to just, call me so that it's not in a forum, I'm happy to get informed about what's going on.
I don't know what he can share and what he can't, so I will talk to
Yep.
him and I'll get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
This is Tracy Walker again. In order to close out this agenda item, are there other items that we should be discussing or trying to get answers about in terms of barriers moving forward? Is there something that hasn't appeared on our list yet, has not been addressed, that we need to add? Okay, well, certainly people can get a hold of Peter, Keith, or I in between meetings, and we can certainly always add something to the next agenda. Next meeting is going to be March 7th. Before we adjourn, is there anything else sort of for the good of the order?
I'll give what I can remember, so where we're at and an update of what we're doing. You already heard that we have providers that are going to the Deloitte open house meetings, and they're going one-on-one, which is fantastic. One of the things that we are looking at this point is we have to resubmit our Appendix K to CMS. The Appendix K is basically the description and approval of all the different pieces that we have in the ARPA initiative. So some of that stuff we're doing is clarifying some of the language. Also, one of the things we're looking at, knowing that the initiative has not gone as quick as we had hoped. And so we're in the discussion right now of possibly some new incentives to be included. Once we get those, we would then have to have a discussion with CMS. So we've got some ideas that we're working through. We're now on a tight schedule. We thought when we had discussions with CMS that this would just be an internal change between CMS and DDS. And that's what we were originally told, and that's where we were proceeding. It's now, we were told a couple weeks ago that this now is not, that's not how it's going to happen. It has to be done through the regular channels, which means we have to have a public hearing, and it's going to extend how we do that. And so we're trying to work quickly on our end to amend this and move forward, and then we'll have a public hearing on it. But one of the things that we're looking at is possibly having an incentive payment for providers who put in a plan, and to assist them with the cost it would cost, the cost of developing that plan. So we're looking at that kind of incentive, and we're looking at a couple of other options that are out there, mainly because, as I said, we have not spent what we need to spend, and we need to really utilize this money in a better fashion. So we're working through that. Anybody have any questions on that?
Well, Peter, I have a comment. It's Kathleen Stauffer from the ARC Eastern Connecticut. First, I like that very much. I appreciate the logic there. I also think that when you're looking to invest, and I do see this as investment, I understand why forward-thinking agencies who are already having some of these things in development, why you can't, I know government doesn't really like to look back, but what I like about what you just said is it does reward agencies that are on the more on the cutting edge of transformation. And as you're looking to spend money, you might want to reward organizations that are ahead of the curve for being ahead of the curve, so that people might not be so shy about jumping in future if they know it's going to be rewarded. Because I think people don't know how things are going to turn out, so they're afraid to jump in.
Mm-hmm. We can take that back and take a look at that.
Okay,
Anybody else have any questions? Let's see if we did that. A couple of things. I know we've talked about this, the rewarding work website, which is for staff who are families who are in need of staff, has been redesigned, and that's to be started as of March 1st. The AT grants, those have been sent out. So if providers are looking for additional money for assistive technology, these grants are available. They're broken down into grants for providers and grants for individuals. We're looking at a third one to go out that would be more tailored to day programs, which I saw a draft of it last week and having some changes made on that. So hopefully we'll get that out soon. We're looking at an AT Assistive Technology Conference in, I believe it's around June 23rd-ish. I don't have the exact date because I don't have the internet. And then we'll also have an Assistive Technology Camp, which we'll do out of Camp Harkness. We issued the non-project-based supportive housing. And so we're really hoping that we get some providers that will work with us to see if we can get those housing projects that are already built to move in this direction. We've done this with housing projects from scratch. This is to see if this way we can do this for housing projects that are out there already built. This would cut down on the delay that it takes between getting it approved, building it, and getting it up and running. We're looking to have providers we can work with. It's something that we don't know the answer. And so we've put this out to see if we can get providers to join and partner with DDS to see if we can get this done. So that's my quick update from the top of my head.
This is Tracy Walker again. Thank you, Peter. Anything else before we adjourn? Wynn?
Yes, a question, whenever it's from the ARC of Connecticut. Peter, if I could ask you, is the non-project-based supportive housing thing something that is in the process of being designed and spec'd out? And is that, where does that stand? Where does that stand?
We issued an RFP, or a notice of opportunity, to providers. So this would give them, I mean, what we're looking at is a supportive housing program, and within an already built and up and running apartment complex. And so how we can do that. So there's an NOO that's out there that gives money
Okay.
for the providers to work through the issues.
Okay. Thank you. So, and that is not in connection with the present service, underutilized service of shared living in any way?
No,
Thank
this is more like supportive housing. Yep.
Okay, this is Tracy Walker again. Any further questions or comments before we adjourn for today? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Gary, second?
Second.
Michael? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Once again, I apologize for our internet issues. So thanks everybody for bearing with us.